Hello, welcome back to Sweet MTG, and welcome to Instant Deck Techs. In this series, we go over everything you need to build a certain commander. We'll go over the strategies and the types of cards needed you need to get the deck working. Any cards we mention will be down in the description below. In this video, we're going to be looking at Nine Fingers Keene. It is 1 black, green, blue for a 4/4 legendary creature human rogue with menace and ward pay 9 life. It also has, whenever Nine Fingers Keene deals combat damage to a player, look at the top 9 cards of your library. You may put a gate card from among them onto the battlefield. Then if you control 9 or more gates, put the rest into your hand. Otherwise, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Nine Fingers Keene leads a gate tribal deck with a landfall subtheme. The aim of this deck is to firstly make sure we can connect with 9 fingers repeatedly, so we can start triggering its ability. With that, and some other cards we're going to play, we're going to get all the gates out of our deck as quickly as possible, as once we have 9 gates in play, we basically draw 9 cards every time it deals combat damage to a player. That is an absurd amount of card draw, which will combine with cards that let us play multiple lands per turn, and some super strong landfall effects to close out the game. First up in the game plan is giving Nine Fingers Keene some evasion, so it's guaranteed to get its damage through and trigger its ability. We first up have a wide selection of auras and equipment that can give great evasion. Aqueous Form, Aether Tunnel, Alpha Authority, Whispersilk Cloak and Way of the Thief all make 9 fingers unblockable, meaning we're guaranteed to get through and start the ball rolling to let us look at the top 9 cards of our library. We then have some other effects, which make 9 fingers all but unblockable. It already has menace, so by giving it flying or making it only be blocked by walls, or giving it non-basic land walk, will all do the job, so there's plenty of options to suit anyone's budget. The next section is cards that either get gates out of the deck or care about them when they're in play. A good portion of these will overlap with the ramp that we're running as well. First up are cards that directly go and get gates out of the deck. These are slightly slower than regular ramp, especially as the gates come into play tapped, but the important part is that they work towards the magic 9 number of gates that we need to get 9 fingers up and running. Next are some cards that can get gates or any other lands that we're running out of our deck and into our hand. I personally wouldn't count these towards our ramp count, as we still have to play the lands that they tutor up, but again, they are really important in getting us that 9 gate count as quickly as possible. Cards like Crop Rotation, Sylvan Scrying, Nylea's Intervention will also let us run a higher number of utility lands than normal, as they can help get them out of the deck as and when they are needed. Next up is a couple of creatures that reward us for playing gates, either by themselves getting bigger or by being cheaper to cast. These can be some really solid beaters, even in a game of Commander, and as we're playing all the gates anyway, they're really solid includes that are nice and budget friendly. Next is going to be our ramp proper. As we're going to have some landfall cards in our win conditions sections, we're going to want to run slightly more than a regular deck. First up is cards that let us play multiple lands per turn cycle. These will work really nicely with the cards we've already mentioned that can go and get gates and put them into our hand, and will mean we'll be putting an absolute boatloads of gates and other lands into play. One issue with these is that they can be a little pricey. That's where cards like these come in, cards like Sakura-Tribe Scout, Skyshroud Ranger, Llanowar Scout, Scaled Herbalist and Walking Atlas, where you tap them to put a land from your hand into play. Currently, only Sakura-Tribe Scout is more than $1, and these are great budget includes that'll do a good impression of their more expensive counterparts. After those, we have some rampant growth effects that go and get lands out of our deck and put them into the battlefield. This is a deck where the more mana intensive ones, like Cultivate and Kodama's Reach, will really shine. As with the other effects we're running, we should be able to put that extra land they get into play as well for some extra land drops. Next up is our card draw section. Even though our commander will draw us tons of cards when it's online, we'll still need some card draw to get us to the point where it's ready to go. First up is Gateway Sneak and Guild Summit. Gateway Sneak works really nicely with our gates package, as well as all the evasion that we've gone over, and it can just chip away at a player's life total while drawing us some cards. And then Guild Summit can either come down early and reward us whenever we play a gate, or it can draw us a ton of cards in the late game if we really need to refill our hand. Then we have some spells that let us draw cards whenever a land comes into play, with Seer's Sundial, Tatiova Bethnic Druid, the Ultimate of Nissa Vital Force, and Aesi, Tyrant of Gaia Strait. With all the lands we're putting into play, these will do a great job at letting us churn through our deck looking for the answers and win cons that we need. Then we have some spells that draw us cards, while also letting us put more lands into play. Absolutely perfect for what this deck is trying to do, as it refills our hand, all while letting us play more lands and trigger some more lovely landfall effects. Moving over to our interaction, like with most decks you want to start with at least 8 bits and go up from there if your playgroup is more competitive. The Golgari aspect of the colours will be doing a large amount of lifting in this section, mainly because it just has so many good options. Look for things that suit your budget, but also answer a wider range of threats as possible, as you never know what your friends might be brewing next. There's also plenty of board wipes as well. You have the super efficient but not so cheap cards like Damnation, to a more budget friendly option like Crux of Fate, Blood on the Snow, and a card I'm finding myself playing more and more, Flood of Tears. When it comes to winning the game, we have some tried and true methods that are sure to pack a punch. First up is a card that has probably got a lot of people wanting to play Nine Fingers in the first place, and that's Maze's End. What once was a pipe dream alternate win condition comes front and centre in this deck, where we'll be dropping gates for days, and with our land tutors can pick this up for a win out of nowhere. We've mentioned the landfall effects already in the video, and some of the best ones are on screen here. There are so many really good landfall token makers out there, and apart from Field of the Dead, they're all pretty reasonably priced as well. These are fantastic and making us an impressive board state that we can turn sideways to win the game. Another great way of weaponising that landfall is with Obnixilis the Fallen. Like the token makers, this is a really solid way of draining out the biggest threats at the table, while also making a huge beater as well, that we can give some evasion to and get into the red zone. And then we have a card that landfall decks absolutely love, and that's Yarok the Desecrated. Doubling all those landfall tokens, or the life loss from Obnixilis, means we'll win twice as quickly. Then we have a card that is absolutely great at getting all the lands we need from our deck, and that is Scapeshift. You can either use this to get the key gates that you need, or just replace all the lands that you have in play with new ones and trigger all the landfall effects in one large go. If you're adding this, then I would look to run some land recursion as well, with cards like Ramunap Excavator and Muldrotha, so you can replay the lands that you sacrificed from your graveyard. What also goes great in a ramp deck like this is some big dumb X spells that we can throw all of our mana into. A card like Torment of Hailfire can be backbreaking to our opponents, and if they're not dead straight away, we'll have so few resources left that we'll be able to mop up really quickly. Then we have Genesis Wave, which I've seen do some really disgusting things in my time, and this is the perfect deck for it. As importantly, everything comes in at the same time, which includes all those lands and the landfall creatures, so they all see each other. Then lastly we have Villainous Wealth, for when we're tired of looking at our deck and fancy having a go with an opponent's. What's sweeter than beating them with their own cards? Rounding off the deck with some utility lands, as we mentioned we can run slightly more than the average 3-colour deck. Firstly, we need to talk about the gates themselves. Obviously, we're going to be playing every one that we can in this deck. Most of them will just help with the fixing, which in a 3-colour deck is still very important. But cards like Baldur's Gate can generate us a load of mana, and then Basilisk Gate can pump up our commander so we can get through for that 21-point commander damage win. Then we have cards like Thespian Stage and Vesuva, which can copy other lands. This means in this deck there are effectively 2 extra gates, and because more is always more, these are some great additions. Next up is Command Beacon, which can help reduce the cost of casting our commander in the late game. Fortunately this deck doesn't really need the commander to win, but late game it can just draw so many cards that being able to recast it on the cheap will be really good. Then last up we have some solid utility lands that tap for coloured mana. Bojuka Bog is great at nuking an opponent's graveyard, and then Talaria West and its transmutability allows us to tutor up any land from our deck, including things like Maze's End and Field of the Dead, which is obviously fantastic. And then you have things like Mortuary Mire, which is a really solid bit of recursion for some key creatures. The rest of your mana base will be very dependent on what you have available to you. We've recently released a video with some advice on building a deck with a budget mana base, which might be of help. Until next time, please like, share and subscribe, and let us know down in the comments if there are any commanders you'd like to see a deck tech on. Thank you very much for watching.